the document the DJ gives patrons when they sign up to use the AV equipment. There's some things to note here that I just wanted to point out. The first being that we do ask patrons to contact us at least 5 business days in advance of their event. In practice, that doesn't happen as regularly as we'd like, but it gives us something in writing to fall back on if we are unable to accommodate them. Of course, they contact us with the avtraining@sclolibrary.org email address. You can be added to that group so you can get those emails and help us out. Just let me know after you've done this training and we can get you involved. We'd very much appreciate it as this has become very popular. And then it's a list of the equipment that we have available. I will pretty much go over all of that stuff in the video to follow, so I'm not going to cover anything specifically here. One thing that we like to point out early when we talk to patrons is that they should bring their media if they're using our computer. They can put it on a USB drive. That's normally fine, but as a fallback, we would also encourage them very much to have that media, if possible, available through some cloud-based storage, like sending it to themselves in an email attachment or using Dropbox, Google Docs, that sort of thing. Pretty much everything else here is covered, so I'll leave that be. Just this last paragraph, I should note that, of course, the old school equipment is still available through the reference desk, including carousel slide projectors and overhead projectors. We don't really cover that in AV training usually. If they want to use those devices, they actually have to project on the blackout blinds on the window because the main projector screen is tied to the projector itself. You can't use one without the other. Okay, so the first thing that you'll need to explain is that once folks are in the room, they'll actually also need access to the AV closet as well, for nothing else than just to turn on the system. So what I usually explain is, since this door always remains locked, there's no way to permanently unlock it, I like to encourage them to just open it slightly and then open the second, shorter door. That way they can get back in the closet if they need to without bothering anyone at the desk to get the key. And then they can just open it because this little tab keeps the door open. This is the main AV rack then. 9 times out of 10, the only thing you're going to need to show someone, but I always assess what they need first, is just to turn on the big red switch, which is right here. This should always be turned off. Sometimes it gets left on, but that powers up the system. It allows you to use the projector and the screen. Most of the time, if they're using a computer or the built-in computer, that's all they'll need, but there are some other things to note that are in this equipment rack, so we'll go over that now. The other most common thing after the computer is the DVD/VCR player, so that's right here. It's a combo unit, so I like to tell them to select either DVD or video as they come back here to load it, then they don't have to keep coming in and out again to do things later. If it is a DVD, you might want to assess what their aim is with the DVD. If it's to press play and go through the whole thing, then this works great. If they want to select individual chapters, it'll probably be easier for them to do the DVD through the computer in the front of the room. So you can think about that. Another little thing of note that's not too often asked about, but you can actually project television through the projector, and that's done through the VCR. As you may know, most VCRs have TV tuners in them, so you can record programs, and this one does too. So we have basic cable channels on this VCR. No HD channels, nothing beyond your basic network coverage, but it's something. The other large thing to be made aware of that you may run into at some point is accessing what we keep in this drawer in the bottom. Most of the time you're not going to need to access it, but there's extra equipment. There's remotes for all the different devices, including if they insist on selecting chapters for the DVD, then they'll have to use the Sony remote for that. There's some extra batteries in here usually. I'm not going to really cover anything else. The only other thing that I will point out is the remote for the projector. This comes in handy if you want to use the Apple TV, which I'll cover later. Also equipped with a SoundMate system for folks with hard of hearing issues. We keep 2 of these devices in the kitchen next to the microwave. If they see this sign on the door and ask about it, certainly let them know that these are available. Of course, they have to be using a microphone or the sound through the PC or something for that to be picked up. But it's a nice system. We keep headphones and extra things in the drawer that I just showed you in the cabinet. But most of the time these are designed to work with people's hearing aids, so they shouldn't need anything extra. They automatically recharge themselves just in this little base station right here. In the Circ office, or I'm sorry, in the Circ desk drawer, they keep 2 keys. One is labeled keyboard, one is labeled cabinet. The cabinet is the cabinet underneath the podium. Normally we would not open that up for a public event unless there's something they needed to do, like access the DVD player. But normally we would keep that closed and they would only be given the keyboard key, which unfortunately goes into the key 2 different ways, but only turns in one of the ways. I think I got it right the first time. This time sometimes you don't. Once it's turned, then you can just pull the tray out and it pops out the screen as well. We'll cover the computer in a minute, but I want to show you what we keep in the cabinet, just so you know what's in there. It may not be terribly bright, but the Mac Mini is here. This is the computer that's plugged into the projector. We also have our airport device here. This is the Wi-Fi for the community room. So if the Wi-Fi is down here, you can actually just unplug the power from that with white cable and plug it back in, and that'll bring it back up. This is a little machine that'll switch between the Mac Mini and if they bring their own laptop. I'll show you how that works in a minute. And then this is the power for the microphone in the podium. So normally that's left on, but if people complain about feedback or something like that, it can be turned off. There's just a power button in the front of it that comes out. But if you do that, make sure you turn it back on, because we expect it to be on most of the time. And everything's plugged into the power here, but that's basically what's in there. We also have a S-video cable for some reason if there's a video camera or something that somebody wants to hook up to the projector, that's available. The main control panel for the projector and the screen is this lovely black box on the wall here. There are a number of things to go over. The first thing that you'll need to train and explain rather closely to people is actually how to get the projector and screen on. It's never worked the way it's supposed to, so I always try to inject a little humor in this because it seems a little funny to me too. The procedure for getting everything to turn on is not simply to press the power button, which is the way it's supposed to work, but rather you have to press and hold it till the green light flashes, then release it and then tap it 2 or 3 times again until it actually turns on. So observe, I will follow my own instructions here. I'm going to press and hold. It's now flashing, so I will release and tap it. And now on the second tap, you may have heard the screen start to descend and the projector start to descend as well. It does take a little while for the projector to warm up, so before you panic about no screen image, it's good to wait and let that warm up, and usually you'll see something right away. If not, you can check over here. The various inputs that I discussed earlier are here. This is video inputs in this case. The one that we'll be using most of the time is PC, and that's the one that's currently brightest, so that's the one that's indicating is selected. But you can switch to the VCR or the DVD player, that S-video cable in the podium I showed you already. And then these other 2 video inputs are not ones that we typically use. There is a component video available in the back of the room, and the composite video is actually buried and not able to be used at all at this point. There are also basic VCR and DVD controls here. As I mentioned, you cannot select chapters from your DVD usually, but you can press play, pause, skip to the next chapter, and stop. Same with the VCR controls. And then the other thing of note is the volume knob. This knob will actually turn infinitely up and down. It doesn't have a stop. It doesn't stop itself. So you'll notice the little red light that says max min. That will indicate whether you've turned something all the way up or all the way down. Now if the microphone in the podium is on, it'll probably feed back before you get to the maximum. because of the speakers in the room. I'm just turning it up now. It's already at its maximum. I guess it's not pointed to the speaker currently, but usually you'll need to back off that a little bit or be concerned about feedback issues. You'll notice that there are 3 logins. I'm going to talk about 2 of them today. The SCLOS staff user is in fact an administrator of this computer, so you can use that to do a lot of things, and I'll cover a few of them in a little bit. But the one that we'll be training people on for the most part is the guest user option, which is right there. This is a special user available in Mac OS X that gives a user a pretty nice clean slate every time they log in. All you have to do to actually log in is simply click that. You'll see a little blank for a password at some point after clicking it, but you don't actually have to enter a password. You just have to wait for the login process to complete. Every time that you log in as the guest user, you're starting with a new default. So any files or settings changes that may have happened the last time disappear, and you only see what we have designed for our patrons to see when they log in. You'll notice across the bottom, if you're not familiar with Macintosh, this application area across the bottom is called the dock. The most popular applications that people will be interested in, we have 3 web browsers available to them. Safari is the built-in Mac web browser, and of course Firefox and Chrome. I will mention something about Chrome really quickly. Chrome unfortunately comes with a whole bunch of software in the back end that tries to keep things up to date, which works great in a normal environment, but in a public environment can sometimes cause issues. So if you see any pop-ups on the screen, or the public does, mentioning Chrome needing to update or something, it's best to just sort of cancel through those. You're not going to be able to do much as a guest user anyway, but other than being an annoyance, it shouldn't be anything that really gets in the way of the function of the machine. In addition to the web browsers, then we have your basic applications. Keynote is the Apple version of PowerPoint, and that's available right here. Of course, PowerPoint itself, Microsoft, PowerPoint, Word, Excel. We do have Skype and FaceTime as web conferencing options on here. Something to be aware of for the public, we're not currently offering a web camera in this setup. We do have one that's available for staff-related programs, but Skype and FaceTime will want to have a camera to work well. We would encourage public, if they're interested in bringing their own webcam. Macs are pretty good these days with most hardware, and most of them should be plug and play. You just plug into the USB port on the screen and they'd work. However, if they don't work, there's really no promises, but they are available if someone wants to give them a shot. Lastly is the System Preferences panel. A lot of the preferences are not accessible to the guest user for obvious reasons. The ones that are show up here, and you can make some changes. Any of the changes made here are not really permanent ones. They're simply basic ones that they can make changes. Like, for instance, if it's someone that needed universal access type things like a voiceover or something like that, that's available. That is the guest user by and large. The one thing I wanted to point out was, I'll go into Firefox here. All 3 of these web browsers should have all of the plugins that most folks will need, like Flash and Java and that sort of thing. Of course, keeping those up to date is an ongoing challenge. So if you hear from any patron that they need something updated or something isn't working right, let me know and I will try to get it sorted out as soon as possible. It's a never-ending task. What I wanted to show you, though, was that you now have an option from any browser or any of the programs to print to the CircOffice printer, the copier. In the guest user, that should be password protected, but if you print from any of these programs, you'll see the little lock next to CircOffice. But if someone needs to print something for some reason, use your best judgment. Obviously, normally we charge 20 cents a page, but certainly if it's our own program or something we're co-sponsoring, this is a great feature to have. You just go ahead and click print, and then it should ask for a username and password. You can use the SCLOS staff username and password here. That's actually the only one that will work that you know. If you don't know that password, please refer to the document that linked you to this video, or just ask one of the trainers that do know it. I think they keep a copy of the password at the circulation desk as well. But that should, oh, that's interesting. It's just some sort of runaway script. I don't think that has anything to do with printing, because it looks like the printer is now printing, and in fact appears to be. So you can go get that in the Circ office. If you're printing from the staff user itself, I don't believe it is password protected. You can just print directly, so that's also an option for your own programs. That is the guest user. Another thing to be aware of course, is if they've copied over any files from their flash drive or something like that, when they log off for any reason at all, those files will be lost. If you need to, for some reason, switch to the staff user to do something, but you don't want that to happen, there is a feature built into Macintosh that allows you to switch. You just click the guest user account here, and then you can just switch over to Disclose Staff without logging out of guest. That is just handy to know. I'm going to do that now because I want to show you the Disclose Staff user as well. This, of course, is password protected, and it's the same password I already referred to. Probably take a little while for the staff user to load. And here we are. You'll see basically the same programs that we saw in the guest user, but this account will not have any restrictions in terms of what the user can use. So this isn't necessarily something you would normally want to give the public access to, but if you need to in a pinch, it is an option. It's also what I would encourage you to use if you yourself are giving a presentation in the room, or it's a library-run program. One interesting thing is Google Drive I have installed on this. I'll talk more about that in the future, but you can actually access files stored in Google Docs that way. So if you have a presentation that you want to share to the community room, I'll send out something about that, but that's available there. Other than that, you would have complete access to the system preferences, any number of options that you might need here in Macintosh land. I'm not going to cover any of them specifically, but as an administrator, you can install programs, you can update things, you can do all kinds of damage, of course, to the machine, so please proceed cautiously. I'm going to log out of staff. Actually, I'm sorry, the Apple is where you log out proper, as opposed to just switching users like we did before. Confirm that I'm logging out. And eventually does switch. This computer is not the fastest Mac on the block, but it should work for most things, but some things do take a little extra time. I just wanted to show you from the guest user, when you go to log out, you're going to get a warning when you try to log out of the guest user that reminds you that any changes made to the account, any files that were created or saved to the computer will be deleted at logout. Just want to stress that when you're training people that they remember that. I do, by the way, encourage people, if they're using PowerPoint or Keynote or something like that, to actually copy the files from their USB flash drive over to the desktop on this machine. Usually those PowerPoints and things that have lots of images and stuff will just load a lot faster. It won't be as laggy if it's loading off of the desktop than if it's running off of the USB drive. So that's something to be aware of. I just thought of something else to point out in the Finder here. I didn't talk about that. That's sort of the equivalent of Windows Explorer. If you open the Finder, it lets you browse various things on the computer. This is where you would find a USB flash drive if it were plugged in. I don't have one plugged in right now, but if I did, you would see it listed on the left side here. I think it's under the shared pane. It would be like Corsair or blah 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 or whatever the flash drive's name is. Sometimes it's called No Name. That's a Mac quirk, but you'll see it there. So that's one way to access the flash drive if it doesn't pop up automatically. Okay, that's the basics of this computer. I am going to show you the logout, and that'll be it. Remember where the logout is. It's in the Apple menu. I can't seem to remember that this afternoon. If you needed to reboot the computer, that is an option here as well. Here's our warning about the guest user, and yes, we're going to log out. Okay, there we are. This is where you should normally see the screen when you come up, unless the guest user is already logged in. If someone wants to bring their own Mac or PC and use that with our projector, that is supported. There is one caveat right now. We do not have a way to project audio through that setup, at least not one that we support for public use. So if they want to use their own laptop, you want to make that clear that there's no audio capabilities from their laptop to the house sound system. However, the port to plug that in is right here on the side of the podium. It's just a standard VGA port, is what they call this little trapezoid shape. If folks have a Macintosh computer, then they may or may not have the appropriate adapter for that. That isn't necessarily something we provide, but I believe the reference desk does have some of those adapters available, so if someone was in a pinch, that would potentially be an option. Underneath the keyboard tray in the podium is where we typically will keep the VGA cable. There are lots of extras, and this does disappear on a regular basis. So contact one of us, and tech staff will find you an extra if this one disappears, or often sometimes these pins get damaged. The other thing that's underneath the keyboard that's important when people bring their own computer is this little blue switch with the blue light on it. That's just a toggle switch, so when there is another computer plugged in, you can switch the projector back and forth between the Mac that's in our podium and their own device. So that's just a toggle switch that lets you switch between those two. When people bring their PowerPoint or whatever file they plan on using with our computer in the podium, they'll often bring it on a USB drive. You can usually use the one right here in the podium itself that's connected to the Mac Mini, and it should plug in just fine. Sometimes it's a little too big to fit in there. I had one of those last week. There's also a port on the side of the monitor. There's two ports actually that are available and should work. So there's plenty of USB connectivity if they need that. You'll notice also in this panel with the USB port, there are 3 power ports, and the Ethernet port is plugged into our wireless network. So if for some reason they're having trouble connecting to wireless, that would be an option for them as well. We usually keep an Ethernet cable underneath the keyboard as well. The audio system in the community room has several inputs. The one being obviously the Mac Mini and the podium, so you can play YouTube or whatever, and that should come out straight through the speaker system. Obviously the microphone in the podium. And then there's 2 others that you may not be aware of. There's 2 large microphone connections in the 2 floor boxes in the room. There's one here in the front of the room, and then there's an identical one in the back of the room. These are sometimes tricky for people to open. There's a little tab that says push. When you push, it releases it a little bit, and then you can just lift it up. In addition to 4 outlets, there is an Ethernet port, which may or may not be active at any given time, and one of the microphone ports. We do not supply any of our wired microphones for that, but if a group wants to use it, it is available. Of course, the master volume for everything is the only volume we give people control over, and that is on the panel on the wall here. We do have an Apple TV connected to the projector up in the ceiling there. It's on the wireless network. The reason that we did that was that there's a really nice feature that you can use an Apple TV for that allows you to wirelessly project any Apple iDevice, like an iPod Touch, obviously, an iPhone or an iPad. You can also now, with the newest release of Apple OS X, project from your Macintosh computer as well, wirelessly. It's a pretty nice feature. It's a little advanced for us to train the public on, so it's not something that we normally offer the public, but I wanted to let you know it's available. The first thing you have to do if you want to use that for your own program is grab this remote from the drawer in the back. It's the projector remote. There's a button near the top here labeled RGB, and that'll actually toggle some of the inputs on the projector. Since it's a separate input that our panel on the wall doesn't support, you have to toggle it with this. And using this remote projector is a little tricky. It helps to be tall, but perhaps you can do it if you're shorter. The thing you want to try to do is point the remote itself at the mirror that the projector projects through, and it should just work that way. But if it doesn't, then I suggest maybe getting a taller person to help you or getting a kickstand or something like that. But it does work. When you're finished with using the Apple TV, you do want to switch back to the regular inputs that that the public can use. You can use the remote for this, or you can just go back to the panel and choose your input on that, and that would work fine as well. The panel on the wall. So for instance, you could just switch to VCR, and that would switch the projector back to VCR right away. Yeah, a couple other things about the Apple TV. I'll happily show you how to use it. It's not too hard, but there are some apps you may want on your iPad or iPod to make it easier for you to use. So please let me know, and we'll set it up for you. Okay. There are two sets of blinds for the large window in front of the room. Depending on how sunny it is, it's very sunny right now, you may want one or both of those down. In the front of the room, right next to the blind itself, is the controls for this shade, which screens out some of the light, but certainly not all of it. It's simply an up-down proposition. The middle button really doesn't do anything for you. So you can say press up and it goes up, or press down, it'll stop, and then down again and it'll go back down. There's an identical control for the blackout blind that'll totally black out, shade out the window. For some reason, instead of putting it beside this one, they put it all the way at the back of the room between the door to the kitchen and the door to the AV closet. I don't know why, but that's where it is. As we walk back there, I want to point something else out to you that you'll usually want to explain when you're training folks. This silver-plated switch here by the back door to the community room is a simple off-on switch. That's for the audio for the back half of the room. So of course this room can be divided in two. So depending on whether they have the whole room for their event or they're simply in the front of the room, you can still use the audio, but you don't want to be projecting your audio in the back of the room if someone else is using it. So that switch will simply turn off or on the audio from the speakers in the ceiling in this back half. If people are complaining about not being able to hear in the back, that's certainly something worth checking. One final thing, it seems like it should be easy enough. There are 4 light switches in this room, 2 for each half of the room. This one is for the indirect fluorescent lights that go around the edge of the ceiling. Simple enough. This is a dimmer switch for the canned lights in the middle of the ceiling. Just a personal pet peeve of mine that they often get dimmed all the way down but don't get pushed all the way down, which actually turns them off. Maybe I just have sensitive hearing, but I walk in here quite frequently and hear a very low buzz and it just drives me crazy. So you can turn it off all the way by pushing it all the way down. There's an identical set of these over by the front door. When everyone is done with their event and they're ready to shut down, it's time to turn off the screen and raise the projector. It's fairly simple. It's a little more straightforward than getting things on. The one thing I always try to make a point of when I'm training people, and I hope you will too, is to make sure that the screen itself is very stable and not swinging wildly before you proceed with this procedure. The screen can actually miss the hooks it's supposed to catch up in the ceiling and cause some issues for us down the road. It may get stuck, that sort of thing. So just remind people to make sure the screen is still before they do this. And then all they have to do is simply press in and hold the power button that we previously used to turn it on. As you hold it, eventually the projector turns off and everything goes back to its original state. Final step in closing up at the end of the event, of course, is to shut off the large red switch again. First, perhaps removing any DVDs or VHS cassettes that may be in there or any other equipment that they may have used. And then put this remote back in the drawer. And that's simply it. Then we'll just shut off the light in here and make sure that this door is shut and locked, and return any keys that they may have used to the circulation desk.